everyone. We're so excited to be part of the Love Letters to the Barnstormers 90th year. So I am here in the room. Oh, I just got chills. I'm here in the room with an incredible group. Well, we're not really in the room, but you know what I mean. We're in the Zoom together.
We're an incredible Zoom.
Incredible Zoomers. And so my name is Margaret Cleveland. I am known in these parts as Muzzy, and I have the extraordinary privilege, and I'm not kidding, I almost get verklempt saying this, of being the chair of the Barnstormers board, which is amusing since I have known about the Barnstormers since before I was born, and the idea that I'm, like a grown-up now is sort of scary since I, rocked the slats of my cradle for the Barnstormers. But anyway, so I am thrilled to be here and thrilled to be here with our compatriots here, and we have a great, great group. So, and here's Doug Shapiro. And Doug, would you like to, and in fact, it would be great if you would introduce yourself. I know everybody knows you, of course, but what was your first encounter with the Barnstormers, and when did that moment happen where you fell in love?
Sure. Hey, I'm Doug Shapiro. Were it not quarantine, it would be my 20th season with the Barnstormers, which makes me still a kid in Barnstormers years. My first encounter was, besides one summer in New Hampshire, I was coming back from Mount Washington Valley Theatre Company in North Conway. And as I was driving home, I saw the sign for the Barnstormers, and I said, you know what, I just want to take a look. And I happened upon Strike Day. So I walked up to this man who turned out to be Cope Murray, the artistic director. I said, need some help? He said, sure, man, help out. And so I helped move stuff. A couple years later, through whatever circumstances, something that I sent out as marketing material landed on his desk at the right time. He asked Ann Batchelder, so wave hello, and Danny Rubin, may he rest in peace, to look out for me at the general auditions in New York.
So Hannah, your first encounter.
Well, like you, Muzzy, my first encounter with the Barnstormers was in utero. My dad, Will Cabell, was one of the founding, no, not founding members. He would be much older than that. But he was one of the company members for a long, long, long time. And so when I was born, he was already entrenched there. So I grew up in the green room. I grew up in the audience. I grew up backstage. And then I grew up on stage. My first time getting on stage was when I was 5 years old. I was in a production of They Knew What They Wanted. And I ran into Dan Rubinate's arms every night. And I was thrilled about it. And then I continued over the years to edge my way in there a little further, until when I was 16, I got my equity card there and sort of started doing more and more weeks per summer. I can't remember. My long-term memory is as bad as my dad's. And I must say that I attribute it partly to the Barnstormers, because learning 8 full scripts a summer, it really, I feel like, makes your brain just expel anything that it feels it doesn't need.
Excellent. So Will, you were the one who brought Hannah into the world, and you were, again, you and Doug both, and Shayna and all of you were heartthrob of the Barnstormers. Tell us about your first encounter.
The Barnstormers. Well, I was super fortunate. I went to Belknap College, which was down at Center Harbor, as sort of a draft dodger, but I like to come well. And before the summer of 1970, I acted as the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz at Belknap College. And I was a terrific lion, I have to say. But Nancy Hallgren worked at Belknap College as a secretary there. And she had been hired by Francis, I think maybe the year before or 2 years before, as had Dave Brown. He was also very young at that time. And Nancy went and told Francis about me. And I don't remember, I think he came to see it, but I'm not sure. But that was it. He hired me for, I think it's 6 shows that first season. My first show was The Imaginary Invalid. playing one of the young doctors or one buffoon, and then went on from there, scrambling my brain, 8 weeks a year. It was totally intense. It's totally intense, and you just learn of it completely because you're in the family. I mean, it was like a new family.
And Batchelder, you are our touchstone, our cornerstone, our archivist. Tell us about your first encounter.
I was 12 years old, and I was in January Thaw playing the young girl, which Hannah has played that part too. But the reason Frances asked, well, I knew the Clevelands because they were good friends of my parents. So I knew Frances and Alice and Marion. And Frances told my mother and said, could Anne could she be in this? Would she like to do it? Because she knows how to swear.
Something haven't changed.
that was how I did. But, of course, then right after that, the next year, I think it was, I was hired as a prop girl. I couldn't drive. I could drive, but I wasn't allowed to drive. And my mother did the driving part, and I did the backstage part, which was much more fun. And then after a while, then we move on, and I did that. And then when I got to be 16, I was able to do the whole thing and drive. And then in 1954, which was Bill Christopher's first year, I was still doing props, but we had a stage manager who was wasn't a very great guy. And he did a couple of things that Alice didn't like, and he got fired. So I did the stage managing for the last 2 shows. Bill Christopher was in the program because he was a member of Equity, and you have to be the stage manager. And my sister-in-law did props. So that was sort of the beginning of the end, whatever it was. And the next year I joined Equity, and I was the stage manager for a lot of years.
Shayna, you are our ingenue at the moment. So tell us your initial encounter. And we all know that things have happened in your life as a result of your life at the Barnstormers.
Yeah. Yes, it has. I would say that I have met some deeply important people in my life coming from the Barnstormers. But it really all started with Doug Shapiro. I know. Doug always has a hand in everything, doesn't he?
I beg your pardon, madam.
Whatever am I talking about? No, I had just gotten my Equity card. The Barnstormers was my second EPA ever in New York. I was fortunate enough to get a callback. And I believe at the time, something very, very different than what Doug's experience was. I swear that everybody and their dog was there at this callback. It was just teeming with people, and it was overwhelming and so exciting because it was just the energy of so many people who were like ready to dive in to this 8-show season. And I got in the call, and I came in and I read and I did it, and it was done, and I was on my way out, and Doug kind of pulled me aside and he goes, "Hey, I'm really looking for somebody to go in and read for this role in this room. Do you think that you can just, I'm going to hand this to you. Do you think you can go and do it?" And yeah, sure, of course. This was not what I was called back for. This was not the show that I was called back for, none of that. But Doug, being the incredibly generous monitor that he was, said, "Yeah, I'm going to give you another shot." And I went in, and that was the show that I got, was the role in the show that I was not called back for. But it was it was seeing that excitement, right? That you come into a room with people who are equally invested in getting a chance to be a part of this theater. And I was so excited that I got to experience that.
Oh, I love that, Shayna. Well, we're certainly glad to. Doug, good work. What is it about the Barnstormers that is the thread that connects us? And it's not only connection to a gorgeous place, I mean, obviously to that fabulous building, which my grandmother helped build. And one of my favorite stories about the Barnstormers too is that my grandmother, who was the first lady, when she was much older, I have pictures of her everywhere here. She would greet people, and her name was Preston because she had a second marriage. So she would stand on the steps, and here was this old lady shaking hands and greeting people, and they had no idea that she was a former first lady. And she was so passionate about the theater, she would drag her husband, and he was president, to the theater all the time, not thinking back to Lincoln at the time. But anyway, but we know that that definitely was a piece of it. But anyway, but here's that gorgeous building and that gorgeous place. But then it's all about you all. It's all about the connection between and among the company. I mean, one of the things I think that's really driven it is this spirit of connection and team. And here, and Bob's talked about this, you know, how when everybody gets together on that first day, it's just chaos. And then out of chaos comes this incredible art. And it's really stunning. And so, and I mean, I think the connection is everything, and love of art, love of theater, love of each other, love of a beautiful place, and love of what theater does for people. It changes people's lives.
I would say loyalty.
Yeah.
I think loyalty is what keeps us going and brings us together. It's once you've worked with Frances, that's kind of, you know, it's all downhill from there in a way, because he was such an incredible person. I sat next to that man every summer for 10 years, and you know, I adored him. He was like another father to me. And my father was still with us and all, but you wanted to do a good job because you wanted to make Frances happy.
You know, just the caliber of actors and the fact that they return every year. You know, Penny Purcell and, you know, just Dale Place, good Lord, Dee Nelson. You know, just the caliber of people that it attracts. I try and run my life by love and integrity. And Barnstormers always has that integrity that Frances passed down. The belief of, you know, at the time, it's like, well, we got 8 shows to do, and somehow by that date, I will know my lines. So, you know, there's no time for table talk. And boy, oh boy, have we had some people that are freaked out because there's no time for table talk. But, you know, but find your funny voice and your silly walk and move, soldier, move, because you got to have something out by opening night. And also the love part. I love the people there. I feel very loved there. And even in the town, I mean, for me, a lot of the Barnstormers is Susie Jelberg, who is not a Barnstormer, but she's in the town. I met her at Katie's, the other store, when she was working behind the counter, and she's very much the type of person I'd like to be.
So I suspect that there's some stories you haven't necessarily always told about what it's like to be on stage. And well, you know, you and all of you, that there must be a little something to share about a moment that the audience doesn't necessarily see. But Doug, I'm thinking about you as the drowsy chaperone and what that did to your career and to the Barnstormers. That was amazing. But what else?
Well, what's funny about Drowsy Chaperone is it was staged in a way that was really great for the audience, but there was this amazing show going on behind me, and I was placed downstage left, thinking about it, seeing it in my mind's eye, as this entire show went on behind me. And it wasn't until the very end where I turn around and I walk into the group. But we'd be downstairs in Inhibition, they'd be telling this great story, oh, when this happened, I'm like, what happened? I never got to see anything. So for dress rehearsal, Bob let me turn around and watch as I did the narration so I could see what the heck was going on with this show. My favorite moment of that, there were some members of the audience. There was a family, and one of the dads seemed a little disconnected, and I just kept noticing him. And there's a part where I take out what was a Cliff Bar and just like snack on it as I'm talking to them, holding the audience hostage during my narration until the show can begin. And he goes, I bet that's not real. I go, and since my character's breaking the fourth wall, I got to take the Cliff Bar, break off a piece and hand it to him. Like, come and get it. And he stood up and he took it and he ate it like, it's good. I'm like, only live theater. Only live theater.
So you mean when you all are on stage, you actually see and hear things in the audience? I mean, there is nothing.
What? It's true.
Yeah, those moments of interaction, I love it. That's great. What else?
There was one season where Peter, Estella, and Michael, they would hide there was a picture of Joan Crawford, of course, that they really loved. And on every set of every show that summer, you had to find Joan Crawford somewhere on the set. And I just remember it in something like Philadelphia, Here I Come, or a really like dark, beautiful, but dark Irish play. I was looking at the barrel, the whiskey barrel, of course, and all of a sudden there's Joan Crawford's eye just looking out at me through the bunghole.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, of course, there was the zucchinis and Jim
I was
Elwood.
just going to say that.
I wasn't there for that, but I certainly heard about it.
Jim Elwood, what happened?
You really need to elaborate on that because I have terrible
Yeah.
things going on in my head right now.
So I don't know. It was. It became. He told the story on himself all the time. Bless his heart. But Doug, you were there. You probably would.
Yeah, it was, I remember this really well. The crew planted zucchinis all over the stage because Jim was a tall man, bald-headed, and I think that some people occasionally refer to him as the tall zucchini. So they planted zucchinis all over the stage, in the couch, sort of sticking out. And so he wasn't too thrilled about it, as I recall. Will, were you there for that?
I don't remember that. No, it might have been before my time.
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
But I just remember, apparently, I believe he called a equity meeting,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
after the first act to get he was not too happy about it because everybody was laughing on stage. It was like the Joan Crawford thing. I mean, it was these little plants.
Like one of the most wonderful things about being at the Barnstormers is the caliber of people that you get to work with. And I do think that the Barnstormers has an unbelievable kind of arsenal of comedic actors who just, I have never laughed till I cried more than watching some of these rehearsals, and unfortunately while also being on stage with a few of them. One of them being, it was One Man, Two Governors, and one of the challenges was, you know, you're doing these 8 shows in 8 weeks. The sets have to be built so quickly, torn down so quickly, moved in, and we had these 3 moving flats for One Man, Two Governors, that, of course, being a farce, these doors are constantly opening and slamming, and that's so much of the comedy. And I was I was working opposite Paul Melendi, who I strongly believe is truly one of the funniest people that I have ever gotten the opportunity to work with. But there was it was our last show. It was closing night. It was Saturday night. The audience is raucous. Paul is just like feeding off of that, right? Like he's just living for
He's feeding off the scenery too in the best.
He's just eating that scenery, and he ate
Delicious.
so much that he ripped the door off the hinges. The door goes flying, and we still have to use this prop, right? So we still have to be like picking up the door and closing it. And so it just becomes this incredible immediate problem solving that is having to happen on stage, that you are watching people come up with these ways of having to deal with this door that is completely off its hinges. And what are you gonna do? And it was a disaster, a beautiful disaster.
How about the Francis falling over the footlights and Peter Whipple catching him?
Right.
That was a good one. Yeah.
Nice.
That was
It
a good moment.
was a rehearsal, and Francis was backing up. You know, remember how he used to, you don't, but Will does, and
Yeah.
Hannah, when he used to, he'd back off, he'd be talking to you, and then he'd start to back away, and then he backed away too far, and Peter was down there doing something, I don't know, he was a crew member, and Francis just toppled off, and
Into the
Peter
pit.
turned around and caught him, and they decided to try to talk him into doing it every night, but we didn't do that.
But those things that happen all the time that the audience barely sees. I mean, it's incredible how, talk about improv. It's
It
quite,
happens that, and fantastic.
so I'm thinking too about the legacy, I mean, it's 90 years is an incredible thing. We're the oldest continuing running theater in the summer theater in the country. It's quite a legacy. And so we want to propel our legacy into the future and also still be relevant and still be sustainable and still have impact on our audience and our community and on the world. And so what is the thing we want to carry forward, and what are your hopes for the future?
It's important that new points of view are brought out. And how do you do that with the balance of the history that we have and saying, hey, this is going on right now. This is relevant now. And therefore, we want to give you this play that we did 50 years ago that you don't know about, but really pertains to now. And then maybe cast it with the cast of people who are diverse in such a way that drives the point home even more. That says, oh, wait, that immigrant story is this immigrant story. Or just something along those lines. Shayna, I've always felt you could say this so much better than I. You speak so beautifully about
Great job just now. Go ahead.
There's something so truly special about the legacy of this theater that can only kind of move the mission of the theater forward if we can get those stories out, like this idea of sitting down and hearing across the generations experiences at different time frames within the Barnstormers history. I am excited just to listen to everybody's own contributions, right? And so I think taking this as a seed and growing it further, what access, how do we make this even more accessible to those who haven't necessarily gotten to have the multiple seasons that we all have gotten to share in. And I think that as a kid who grew up in Arizona, very, very, very far away from East Coast, very, very far away from Broadway, that just seemed like such a different dream, a different life. Where I did fall in love with this theater was my local theater, was the local playhouses. And that is what Barnstormers has in spades. And I just, that to me is something that is so special that I want to see that grow all that more heading into the future.
What I love about what you said is it's not about the past. We're creating history every year. And so, and I love that thing about connection and mentorship and that piece. And so it's like an ever rolling, wonderful thing. But what I'm hearing though is that this is bigger than just walking into a theater and seeing people on a stage. This is way bigger than that. And what the Barnstormers is, and you all have said this basically, is love, is integrity, is loyalty, is connection, and is community. And it's not just a little town, it's a much broader community. And oh, I'm gonna get weepy. You guys are what makes that happen. And it's the same with the audience. People come in and they leave a little different than how they came in. Their lives are changed no matter what, even if it's they hit a funny bone they've never seen, or they're moved because they have a reflection of their own life that they hadn't thought of, or whatever. I mean, it changes lives. The Barnstormers changes lives.